This is J.G. Hertzler. You're listening to NX 7062 Podcast.
Why, yes, you are listening and seeing the NX 7062 Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie K. Thank you, as always, for joining me here this evening. Worried because I have no idea how I'm supposed to top last week with Wesley Orr. I don't think there's any way to do that. That was an amazing conversation, and I am so glad that he was able to join us. The one thing that I forgot to mention, and I promised myself I would do for him, Wesley is on Cameo. So go look him up on Cameo if you know a Land of the Lost fan, or, you know, like Domestic is, you know, fan of Days of Our Lives, the original Mike Horton. Send somebody you know and love a video greeting from Wesley. As you could see from his appearance here last week, you know he would do a stellar job on Cameo. So go support Wesley, go hang out on his Cameo. Or not hang out on his Cameo, go buy a Cameo from him, that's what I meant. So as you all might have seen my tweet, you know, we are not on Vulcan, and yesterday we did do a little time traveling. We sprung ahead. So hopefully everybody's going to be able to join us because they remembered to set their clocks ahead. It's tough. You know, when people aren't working and we're all kind of doing the quarantine thing, that's, you know, you kind of forget what days are what. Hey, Robert, thanks as always for joining me. Yeah, so you kind of forget what I know. I wake up every morning and have to remind myself what day it is. So just kind of glad that I have more electronic clocks that know how to fix themselves than I do regular clocks. Hey, Travis, how are you? Good to see you all here this evening. So anyway, yeah, so hopefully you'll all have a chance to okay, we're already derailing. My trains of thoughts are already going. One correction, actually, which is interesting. Last week I had mentioned that Star Trek, the 55-year mission, Creation's 55-year mission, had their 104th guest, Vic, I can't even remember his last name right now, who did a voice for Captain Kirk for the YouTube continuing Star Trek Continues. Unfortunately, he does not have he doesn't have a reputation that's very what's the word, stellar, I guess, if you want to go sci-fi-y. Very sci-fi-y. He's been accused of sexual harassment. Read up on him, so Creation has removed him there back down to 103 with Roxanne Dawson being the last added. So good on Creation for not giving a platform to anybody who's been accused, and hashtag me too. You know what's really funny, Travis, is right before the cruise, back in 2019, I was working part-time at a deli, and one of the waitresses who understood nothing of Star Trek, but decided to get me a Christmas present before I left for the cruise, got me a Star Trek calendar and some Spock ears, which I was supposed to wear on the cruise, and then I completely forgot. I took them with me and then just didn't find believe it or not, just didn't find any time to wear them. The one night that I did cosplay on the cruise, I forgot about the ears, and I had an original TOS uniform, and that's all I wore. And I'm afraid to look. There's a cat. I don't know if you saw his head pop up over here really quick. I'm just afraid to look, and come here, let me hold on. Let me see if I can do this. See now, he's back. It's Podcat. Look, hey. For his, all right, and the minute I call him Podcat, he runs away. All right, so whoever was watching just got to see the return of Podcat, however brief it was. That's the first time he's done that in a while. Last time he did it was a couple weeks ago, but it was right before I went on the air, and he's just like, you're turning the camera on, I'm gone. But anyway, so Podcat is still around, and that was his cameo for the night. So let's see, we talked about Wesley, we talked about Cameo. In other cat news, Trip is here. I did go Saturday and pick him up. Some friends of mine were in Orlando and drove him up from Jacksonville. He was in he was at a friend's. I have a friend down in Jacksonville, Florida, that works for a cat rescue, and Trip's previous, I will tell Cat Podcat you said that. Trip's previous owners they adopted him and then returned him a year later. And my friend said nobody was interested in adopting him. And I said, well, I am. I need a trip for my read. And he comes from Florida, so let's do this. So I picked him up on Saturday. He's hanging out in the guest room. I can't promise you when or if you will see Trip because everybody acclimates at their own pace. So we'll wait and see. But anyway, Trip is here. He is safe and sound, and we're working on getting him acclimated to his new home. I think just all the traveling that he did on 2 days, and he actually ended up spending a night with my friend. My friends split their trip up, their drive back from Florida. They did it in 2 days. So they picked up the cat. They spent the night at a friend at my friend's sister's house. And so they let him out and then back in the car and then up and then in the car with me. So I think Trip's head's just a little, he's kind of like a Vulcan on Trillium D, just doesn't know where his head's at right now. So, but anyway, on with the show. Like I said, hopefully you guys all get to meet Trip soon. What are we talking about tonight? It is international. It is, not international. It's Women's History Month. And so why not do a show about all the fabulous women of Star Trek and how they kind of fit into everything and fit into the story, and how did we're also going to kind of look at how does Star Trek treat their female characters from the mid 60s all the way up through Discovery and Picard. And of course we've got to start off with, actually, since the Cage technically came first, we're going to start with the Cage and Majel Barrett as number 1. She was second in command on the Enterprise. It's tripped out. There we go. Yep. Majel Barrett was actually number 1 in the Cage. And it's just interesting because one of the first things you hear Captain Pike say is, I guess I have to get used to a woman on the bridge, or I'm going to have a hard time, whatever it was that he said, which definitely fit the views of women at the time. A woman on the bridge, she's second in command. So good on Gene Roddenberry for trying to make a statement. And then what happens? NBC doesn't pick it up. So what does he do? He makes Spock second in command. But he also gives us a way more diverse bridge because we had Sulu, we had Chekhov. We had an actual alien in Spock. And then we had a Black lieutenant woman as the communications officer. And for those of you that have never heard this, I'm probably paraphrasing, but Whoopi Goldberg has said on many occasions that Uhura, who was her inspiration, and the first time that she saw her on television, ran into the kitchen yelling, "Mama, Mama, there's a Black woman on TV, and she ain't no maid." So Uhura was definitely a huge jump for women in television at the time. And in fact, one of the shows that it's on CBS, it's called All Rise. It's a judge show, which I absolutely love because I am a huge courtroom legal drama junkie. In a different life, I must have been a lawyer. But the lead in All Rise is a Black judge named Lola Carmichael, and the pilot episode is her getting her judgeship and setting up her office. And the first thing she does is put up a picture of Uhura, which is sacred to her because she said that ever since she was a little girl, Uhura was her inspiration. So we all know that Nichelle Nichols and Uhura have just touched so many lives since she stepped foot on the bridge in 1966. And that was great. But then you had Nurse Chapel. You had Majel was still on the show, but she was a nurse, which again, that was, it's interesting as I was doing this and I was looking at female roles. It seems like you do something quote unquote revolutionary, a Black woman on the bridge as an officer. She is the communications officer. But then you turn around and it's almost like, to balance it out, let's have Nurse Chapel, who kind of balances out as a slightly more traditional role. She's a nurse. She has a crush on Spock. She makes some soup in amok time, that kind of thing. So it's kind of like this, they felt like they needed to do this kind of balancing act, especially, and then you turn around and pretty much every other woman that you see in TOS was pretty much just what you would have expected for the time. Scantily clad. Kirk is the ladies' man. You have the Orion slave girls. More on that later. Love of Von Craig, by the way, is in For Whom Gods Destroy. You do see a smattering of strong women characters. Yep. That is absolutely true too. She did almost quit until Martin Luther King was the one that reminded her of what an inspiration she was to women of the time, and her legacy has lived on these 55 years. So thank you to Dr. King for doing yet something else amazing. So the other women, for the most part, were very typical. Then you have the ones that stole Spock's brain that they needed, otherwise they were stupid, that kind of stuff. But then you had Friday's Child with Julie Newmar, who was pretty feisty, pretty strong. Slapped Dr. McCoy right in the face. Don't touch me, I'm royalty. Love that. Is that what it was? That I hadn't heard. You know what? They wanted color, and Gene went, okay, I'll do one better. I'll put a woman of color on the bridge. So Julie Newmar, and then Terry Garr, who I absolutely love, was in Assignment Earth. And she's a lovely looking woman, but she was a little more of a comedic. She's a comedian, and she was more of a comedic role. So it wasn't like the sex pot or the scantily clad. She was just, a working girl, and she had that comedy role. So there's definitely, they threw in some of the women guest stars had slightly stronger roles than just running around with barely any clothes on and falling into Captain Kirk's arms. But again, I think every incarnation of Trek, dealt with women, kind of with the time that they were in. The special features. I don't have the collection. The only Trek collection I have is Enterprise. I don't have the TOS collection, but thank you, Travis. Appreciate that. So moving on out of the 60s into the 80s, we've got TNG. Now we've got a uniform change. The women aren't walking around with skirts that barely cover their asses. They can wear pants, although there was the scant, which Deanna Troi did wear on some occasions. And if you looked and you didn't blink, there was a guy in Farpoint wearing one, which I thought was really kind of cool. You have to watch for it. It's just one of those panning shots where a bunch of people walking up and down the corridor. You know what? I hadn't heard that either. And you know what? That's fine. Obviously, if she had, she probably would have been at a convention, because we all know that Creation will invite people that have only had one-offs. I would have loved to have met her. Actually, I got to know Terry. I think the first role I ever saw her in was the Black Stallion movie. She played the mom in the Black Stallion movie. And of course, she was fabulous in Tootsie. But you know what? I think, again, we're talking about the late 60s. We don't know how she was treated on set. I would think, knowing what the show has done and as popular as the show has been, I would think that something pretty crappy would have had to happen for you to distance yourself from something so iconic. My personal opinion, I don't ever pretend to speak for somebody else. But like I said, if Terry Garr was in Assignment Earth, she played the secretary to the guy with the cat, whose name I can't remember. Yeah, she was in Assignment Earth. But like I said, back then, I can imagine not as a woman, maybe not being treated well on set, or she just had a really maybe, for all we know, Shatner was an ass to her, which we all know is incredibly valid. Thank you, Gary 7. Yep. Yeah, she was his receptionist / secretary. So yeah. So like I said, I feel bad that she had that kind of experience, because I loved that role for her. I thought she was great in it. But again, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. And it obviously was bad enough to leave that kind of taste in her mouth that she would turn down opportunities to go to conventions and earn some money. And obviously, but again, respect that decision. So So TNG. Uniform change, everybody got to wear pants. They had Tasha Yar as the head of security, a woman in a very traditional masculine role. And they balanced that out with Counselor Troy, who was an actual empath. And as I'm sure you all know, women were always considered the more empathetic gender. So you have this really strong, tough woman, and then you balance her out with, the other female on the bridge is the one that feels great joy and gratitude. That line just from Farpoint just always sticks in my head when I think about the first time that Deanna, she feels the pain and she feels joy. So that's kind of a balance. And we all know Tasha also had a really, crappy childhood. So, somebody has to wonder if that has something to do with, it made her tough. But does a woman really have to go through a bunch of shit to be tough? I don't think so. And of course, we can't forget the amazing Dr. Crusher. Oh, side note, and for anybody that doesn't remember, Chapel did actually become a doctor. She was a doctor in the movie, in the motion picture. But for TNG, you had an actual female doctor, Dr. Crusher. And she always stood toe to toe with the captain. But again, there was that whole romantic will they, won't they, for the entire run of the show. They hinted at it in All Good Things, that there had been and then there wasn't. But, you never saw it take place in the real time. So there was, so sometimes, they break the mold and sometimes they don't. And then just because she was there for a season, they had Dr. Pulaski. And they were trying, y'all know, I do not like Diana Muldaur. I don't like anything she's ever done, to be honest. Not that I've seen her and everything. Didn't like anything she did in Star Trek from TOS to TNG. She was also on LA Law. Didn't like her there either. But they were trying to make her the female Bones. Kind of that crotchety, complainy kind of and she was rude. You're right, she was rude. It wasn't that southern charm that McCoy could get away with being rude and and even being bigoted towards Spock. Let's not mince words. But there was that but again, for the times. And then there was that country charm that Pulaski just did not have, whether it was how she was written or whether it was just that Diana Muldaur's portrayal. But she obviously wasn't a fan favorite. Nobody liked her because they went back and hey, domestic. They went back and got Gates to come back. And again, Gates was actually trying to, if you've ever seen her talk about her time and the reason that they let her go between season 2 and 3, it really did. It had something to do with her, being a strong woman and speaking up. And they're like, kind of know your place kind of deal. And that's why she left, to the point where they wanted her back. None of the production staff, nobody behind the scenes approached her. They had to get Patrick Stewart to go ask her to come back because they knew that they had all burned their bridges. And the only way to get her back was to have Patrick ask her. And to answer your quote, where is that? I have not seen Born Free, to answer your question, domestic. No. Yeah, Pulaski treated Data pretty crappily. Actually, the other night, was it last night I turned on Heroes and Icons. I was going to bed early and I'm like, they're in season 2. It was Elementary Dear Data, which was a great episode, except that she was in it, but I did love that episode. And the other thing about TNG is they introduced women from other cultures. You got to know way more about Klingon women and how strong and aggressive they were, which I loved. You got to know about Betazoid women. Majel Barrett, Loxana, one of my absolutely favorite recurring characters. And she was so wonderful and free and open, which was basically a general Betazoid characteristic. But they only Wait, there was two Betazoid men that they had. The guy that talked to the spaceship and went off with him, and the other guy that was kind of cheating on the negotiations because he didn't tell anybody he was empathic. So I love that. And what was interesting was, as a juxtaposition to the strong Klingon women and the strong Betazoid women, you had Ferengi women, which were completely, you find out, just considered they don't have the lobes for business. They had to walk around naked. So Ferengi men did not treat their women with a lot of respect. So you kind of got to see a whole bunch of different cultures reflected in TNG. They started talking about more women. And then, there was that planet that was ruled by women. So we're getting, TNG is starting to take some steps, towards strong female characters. DS9 had some of the strongest, in my opinion. You had Kira Nerys, a freedom fighter, stuck to her guns, stuck to her principles, just did not bend in the face of pretty much anything. She was such a strong representation. She was also second in command of the space station. You had Jadzia Dax, who was a scientist. Moogie was smart. Oh, I'm not saying, listen, Ferengi women were smart. There was Moogie, and then there was the other, and I just watched the episode where the Ferengi woman had to disguise herself as a man and started working at Quarks to prove she had lobes for business, but she had to play a Victor Victoria. She had a not Victor Victoria, but she had to disguise herself as a man. She had to do a Tootsie. She had to disguise herself as a man so that she could be accepted. So it's not that the women weren't smart. It's that Ferengi society didn't recognize it. That's the difference. Until, of course, we had Grand Negus Rom. Moogie. So, yep. That was what was interesting, is that, they were showing, it's like the men were just always looking down their nose at the women, but the women were smart. They did have the lobes for business. They knew what they were doing. But the male-dominated culture just didn't see it until Rom and Lita came along. But again, Jadzia Dax wasn't just a strong female character. She was in the sciences. She was a science officer. And as we all know, Star Trek and women in science, women doing having scientific roles, has inspired other women to in real life to go after those science degrees. Science isn't just for the boys. It has nothing to do. Boys aren't smarter. They don't do science better. If that's what your aptitude is, then you go for it. And it was great. And Star Trek really, nailed that point, having Jadzia as their science officer. And then, but again, we've talked about having Ezri come in and replace Jadzia, who again was this strong, confident woman. Could handle a batleth with any of the boys. Went on crusades basically with her Klingon companions. And was accepted by her male Klingon companions to go fight with them. So then you had Ezri, and what you got to see with Ezri was something that a lot of women have to deal with, and Ezri had to deal with it in a very, very unique way. She's coming into this situation and she's replacing somebody, and she's the exact opposite of Jadzia, which I've said many times. I completely appreciate when you replace somebody like Jadzia, you better go in a completely different direction. Otherwise, you really are asking for way too many comparisons. But Ezri, you got to see this journey, and you got to see her develop her confidence in who she is as a Trill and as a woman, and just, it was a really, really great journey. And I think I've mentioned this before, and it's something that Nicole has mentioned. Ezri also has kind of become, trans, in the trans community. Ezri is very relatable to people in the trans community, with that journey that she went on, trying to figure out who she is, with all the voices in her head from all of her past selves, and trying to figure out who she is at her core. So again, while it was a softer performance, it wasn't, she wasn't Jadzia. It was a much softer performance. It was still it was a performance that came from strength. But then, and then, you had Oh, that's interesting. Why do you think Ezri was like Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz, Robert? I would love for you to expound on that. That's very interesting. But then, you had Lita. And again, Lita was looked at as just a Dabo girl, just like all the other Dabo girls. She was just there to be pretty and do her job. But she proved to be more than just a pretty face. And now she is married to the Grand Magus. So you gotta love that. Again, you got to watch Lita go on a journey in the episodes that she was in, where she was just like, yeah, she was it was a living. You know what? Everybody's got to make a buck. Everybody's got to have a living. This is what she chose for her life. And whatever a woman does in her life, as far as work goes, that's her choice. And so you respect her choice. But she obviously wanted more for herself, and she got it. So now we're on to Voyager, and drumroll, it's the late 90s, and lo and behold, we finally get a female captain, dun dun, which is amazing. And again, she's a scientist. Jane was a scientist. Again, hammering home, science is not just for the boys. You want to be a scientist? Be a scientist. You be a scientist and a captain of a starship. Go freaking figure, right? And then you have Kes, and I'm really, honestly, I'm glad I'm catching these Voyager reruns, because Voyager, I think they're in their 3rd or 4th season. 7 of 9 just come on board a few episodes ago. But Kes was an interesting character, because when she came on with Neelix, okay, yep, I can get that. Yeah, definitely. She definitely. Okay, and she was if we're talking about Ezri, yeah, the crew all, that's exactly, honestly, that's what Deep Space Nine needed at the time. They needed a counselor figure. They needed somebody that they could trust. I'm not sure I'd call her a mother per se, especially considering the fact that she ended up sleeping with how many of them. No judgments, but North Base. There you go. So, train derailment again. Okay, where are we? Kes came on, and Neelix acted like she needed his protection, and she was fragile, and she only had a 12-year lifespan, and she just needed, she needed to be coddled. And Kes is like, no. She wanted to better herself. She became a doctor's assistant. She could study like that. Again, women in the sciences, she picked everything up like that. And then, you were talking about Janeway. Okay, sorry, Travis. That kind of came in with the whole talk about Ezri. We all know that I don't watch Voyager. But I'm still not sure mother's the right word. I'm really not. You can't be in command and be a mother. Those are two very different things. And when Janeway was putting her foot down and laid down the law, she didn't coddle people. You did something wrong. I mean, she demoted Tom Paris. She and Chakotay used to butt heads all the time, on things. And if you did something she didn't like, you paid for it. So I'm not sure I'm not sure I would call her a mother. War Dog's here. Hey. Well, I mean, she had different relationships with different people in the crew, but I stand by. I wouldn't call her the mother to the crew. Maybe a little bit to Harry. And yeah, Kes and Neelix were found together. Yeah. I mean, Neelix was incredibly attached. He was in love with Kes. And what does Kes do? She turns around, and her last episode, she evolves into this incredibly powerful being that shoots them 10 years closer to home and all the way through Borg space. I mean, how's that for character development? Seriously. Oh, I've got competition, War Dog, but you know what? Your loyalty to the chat pack too is absolutely appreciated. Thank you so much. You know what though? If she was Harry, back to this Janeway thing, if Janeway really was Harry's mom, she would have promoted him because she would have wanted to see her little boy succeed. How's that for blowing that apart? Just saying. Again, my opinion. But I don't, like I said, I don't watch. I catch Voyager just because it's rolling into because it rolls into Enterprise on Heroes and Icons. So let's. Oh, can't forget Bolana. I mean, Bolana Torres, female engineer, again with the science-y stuff. And her journey was interesting too because you watched her deal with being half human and half Klingon, which is something we'd never seen before. So again, it's a woman fighting her own inner battles. Oh, well, there you go. Well, you'll have to model them for us sometime. Send pictures. You can post them. I don't know. I know you don't face, but do you tweet, War Dog? Do you tweet? Because I'd love to see somebody else wearing NX 7062 stuff besides me. So Bolana went on her own journey, kind of, and and then she and Tom fell in love. They started a family, doing the whole. So I really do enjoy Bolana's journey and 7 of 9's journey, which we get to see now. Okay, let's see. 7 of 9 was sexy, but no one believes that her attempt to be better at social interactions is very important and meant a lot to those of us. Struggle just never. Well, what I love about 7 of 9. There you go. You do need to become Twitter pated, if only to follow me. I don't care about anybody else, but only if you're going to follow me at NX7062 on the Twitterverse. 7 of 9, and this is going to actually roll over into Enterprise. 7 of 9 did have the sex appeal, and they did dress her in the form-fitting, uniform. But she was also incredibly intelligent. What she retained from the Borg, but then she held on to it. She was head of the Astrometrics lab. She was an incredibly strong woman. And again, you got to watch her discover her humanity. And it traveled further into Picard, where you get to see where her journey has taken her thus far. I like Janeway was her ship and her crew, and she was very protective, but that's why I called her a mother. Her protectiveness to her ship. Well, I mean, any captain's going to be protective. Any captain is going to take the responsibility of their ship and crew incredibly seriously, because when it all comes down to it, it's their crew, and they're responsible for every life that is under them. That's just the nature of the job. She may have been human hot, but her biggest struggle was to become crew. Absolutely. Yeah, just because she said, I just saw the interaction between her and Harry, where she thought Harry was flirting with her, and so she figured she'd let him have sex with her. I thought that was really funny. And Harry, being the gentleman, was like, no, that's not what I meant. I love discomfiture in characters. I think it's adorable. And I think Malcolm Reed does it best. But anyway, I love the discomfiture when Seven was like, does that mean you want to have intercourse, or however it was that she put it? But speaking of sexy, as we leave 7 of 9, Enterprise was considered a very sexy show, because now we're in the 2000s and sex on TV has been a little more liberated. So you get the first episode and you get to Paul and Trip rubbing each other down with this decon gel that for some reason has to glitter. Go figure. Why do you need stripper glitter in decontaminating goo? And it's funny, when I was on another podcast called Falling Tower, which I highly suggest, if you haven't followed it, don't know about it, you definitely should. It's another project with Ryan T. Husk, and they do this thing called WTF, which is Watch the First. So when they watched the first episode of Enterprise, they invited me to watch it. And they had somebody else on with us that had never seen it before. And there you go. Well said, War Dog. And the one person that was on the podcast with us that hadn't watched it was complaining about the sex the sexiness of the show. And my quote unquote defense, because it did go a little overboard, because both T'Pol and Hoshi ended up shirtless at different points in the show, was that they tried to be a little more equal opportunity with the sex. I still don't understand why a Vulcan science officer wore silk pajamas. I don't see the logic in that. See, you can join War Dog for WTF Wednesdays. Don't see the logic in that. But the men appear in their underwear almost just as much as the women did. So they did try to equal it up. There was an episode called Acquisition where it's Trip running around in his underwear for a good half hour, 45 minutes before he finds a uniform. And that's also where T'Pol uses Umox against the Ferengi, which is great, because sex as a weapon, and that was great. But again, so the first season, T'Pol got to wear the uniform she wanted to use, supposedly because she was part of the, she wasn't there as part of Starfleet. She was, she was there because of the Vulcans. But then she resigned her commission with the Vulcan High Command for season 3, and yet they still kept her in those tight-fitting uniforms, as you can see behind me. I'm pretty sure that's from season 3, that purple uniform. They're coming off the turbo lift. She's right behind Archer. And yet Hoshi, was wearing the same jumpsuit. I don't understand why when she resigned her commission, she still, I guess because she wasn't officially Starfleet, she still got to wear what she wanted. And of course they made them these tight bodysuits. And there used to be somebody on one of the Enterprise pages that I follow on Facebook that all they would do is post what they used to call cheesecake snapshots of Jolene Blaylock. I got a little tired of it. I don't know if the admins got tired of it as well and basically said, if you have nothing of value to contribute to this page, then stop with the pictures, because every time you turn around, if you saw this person's, if you saw in your notifications that this person had posted to an Enterprise page, you could be damn sure it was some picture of Jolene. Some of them were just Star Trek related. Some of them were not Star Trek related. And it was just her looking very sexy. And again, I don't have a problem with sexy if that is your choice and it makes you money, as in, posing for these pictures or modeling or whatever. I am all for it. Again, your choice to do as you please. And that goes for men and women. It's just the way he was objectifying. But there's a difference between her doing that for a career and whatever, and this guy objectifying her by constantly just posting these cheesecake pictures of her over and over and over and over again. It's also, I don't know the specifics. If somebody out there does, and I'm not talking about rumor, I'm not talking about innuendo, but if you know something for a fact about why Jolene doesn't do Star Trek conventions anymore, besides the fact that she financially is secure and she doesn't need to do them, I believe it was a bad experience that got her to finally walk away. And my guess is, from that standpoint, that she was approached in an inappropriate manner, I guess is the PC polite way of saying it. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people accused Enterprise of being the sexy show. But again, I mean, they did give the men, equal underwear time. I mean, let's not forget Risa. Trip and Malcolm both ended up in their underwear. So it's still one of my favorite episodes. Because again, they were objectifying women who turned out to be shape-shifting aliens that tried to steal from them, which I thought was really funny. And let's not forget, we also had female Makos. You actually had, they needed the Makos. They needed the military for season 3 to go help defeat the Xindi. And there you go. You had female Makos. So you had women in science. Hoshi invented the Universal Translator. She was the first communications officer. She was an incredibly talented individual who could do languages, who could pick up a new language like that. And she invented the Universal Translator that eventually was what Starfleet used going forward. And when it failed, she had to be the one to think on her feet. She had her, and again, her growth on the show, I will admit, very underutilized character. Wasn't a fan of the character, but having her portray this incredible woman who basically created the Universal Translator and was out there for the first time communicating, the linchpin to communication with other worlds. I mean, come on. What what more can you say about strong women than that? And putting aside her fears, she was not big on space travel. She had fears about space travel. She had fears about aliens. She had a lot of fears, and she overcame them all to do all this. Again, just a really incredibly strong journey. Louis Special Blogger makes comments about casting babes, and Scott jumps him kind of. There you go, Scott Bakula. I've heard some pretty good things about Scott Bakula, so that doesn't surprise me. We're gonna get to how long it took Star Trek to stop doing that in a minute, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Or actually, I'm really not, because from Enterprise we go to Disco, so I'm really not getting too much ahead of myself, because we've got Michael Burnham, and while Burnham is not the captain, she is the main focus of Discovery. She's a pretty strong character, but her journey is about nature versus nurture. She's human, but she was raised by Vulcans, and that's a huge dichotomy, as we know, watching Spock actually live it genetically. Yeah, Hoshi was absolutely awesome. Props to Hoshi. Still, not a big fan of the character, but props for that. I just feel like you can do that. But that's what I loved about Michael, was you watched her deal with her upbringing, and when we first meet her, she's very buttoned up, and and then the first time she kind of lets herself go, she ends up getting her captain killed. But let's see. I thought her character was wonderful. I'm not sure sex. Okay, I'm not sure what you mean by sex positive and currently in vogue. Not sure what you mean by that, but yeah, I would have loved to have met Jolene. I have met, except for Scott Bakula, I have met every single one of the cast that does conventions. I've met Linda very briefly, and I also have my picture taken with her. And we all know that I've hung out with Connor and Dominic and Anthony, John Billingsley, whenever you can bump into him. So yeah, except for Scott, who I was hoping had creation been able to celebrate Enterprise's 20th anniversary, which is this year, which it doesn't look like they're going to be able to because of the licensing issues. I've been hoping to meet Scott Bakula. He's somebody that I would spend money on to get a picture or an autograph, like real money, like creation, take my dough. I need to hang out with Captain Archer. But yeah, I would have loved to have met Jolene as well, but she's just not doing anything anymore along those lines, as far as I know. But yeah, Michael is on this incredible journey, figuring out who she is, how she relates to Starfleet, and again, a science officer. Again, the women in science thing. But again, she's buttoned up, and she's trying to learn how to control her emotions and control her passions. And then, as a counterpoint, we have Tilly, who is also an incredibly smart science type, but she is very much ruled by her heart and her emotions, and they bubble over. And you can't not like Tilly. And the one thing that I love about Tilly, and a lot of people love about Tilly, is that she is a woman of size. She is not a size 2. She is not the perfect body as television would have you think. Or as Star Trek has had you think these many, 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 many years. It took them to get to Discovery to finally say, you don't need to be a size 2 to be on the bridge and to be a member of the crew and to be a valued contributor to Starfleet and to your ship. What is not to love about Tilly? She's great. She's fun. She's got that wild, crazy, kinky hair. She's amazing. And if you notice that the bridge of Discovery has way more women on it than any other bridge has, and of course we meet Captain Georgiou, who gets killed in the first episode of Discovery. Sorry, spoiler alert if anybody hasn't watched Discovery. But then you turn it around and you're introduced to Emperor Georgiou. So in one realm she's a captain, but mirror universe, like Kira Nerys, who is the intendant, all the women in the Mirror Universe seem to have these amazing roles. And we have Emperor Georgiou, who joins the cast on our side of the mirror. Let's see. Okay, so real quick, because I do want to get into discussing the Mirror Universe and sexuality within Star Trek a little more. Picard. You have. Well, hello, Magic Lasso. So glad you could pop in and join us. I know I said it backwards, but my rule on spoilers, by the way, which is why I don't feel bad about not saying spoiler alert if you haven't watched Discovery yet, is honestly, after 48 hours of a show, pretty much 48, 72 hours, if you haven't watched it, I'm not feeling bad if I spoil it, especially if you're coming onto my podcast, because, by the way, spoiler alert, Trip dies in the last episode of Enterprise. Sorry. Anyway, so we've got Rafi in Picard, who is an incredibly troubled. She's an addict. She's got these issues. She's carrying scars around from what happened with Picard. She is a very broken person, and yet again, she powers through because Picard helps her, or because Picard needs her. She powers through, and she womans up, and she's an amazingly flawed character. 7 of 9, we get to see where she is on her journey to discovering herself. And she's still not there yet. But she's kicking her ass while she's getting there. And then, of course, more science-y chicks. You got Dr. Agnes Girardi. She's very, 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 very flawed. But there's a lot of female positive roles. You've got the nuns. You've got the Romulan nuns who only speak the truth. Which I love, because I think, women, I think, in general, obviously value, people, I think, value, obviously, honesty. But I just love that these women get together and they're like, all you can talk about, anything you say has to be the truth. And I just love that. Let's see. What is it? Clear that for 2 seasons, Spock didn't have a sister. Then I watched it and binged through the whole thing. There you go. You just had to give it a chance. Not entirely. We all see how they were able to cover that up, and as in, why haven't we heard about Spock having a sister before this? And they answered that question in season 2, and I'm not going to spoil that. They never answered. But it was still good. It's still. I still enjoy Discovery. I can't wait to see where they're going for their 4th season. I am going to be pissed if they get their 5th season, only because that means they're going to go past Enterprise. But let's talk Mirror Universe, because before we jump into the Mirror Universe, the one thing I did forget to mention. War Dog, Rafi. I understand her walk too well, although I managed to stop myself there. Yeah, see, that's the thing. She's real. Rafi is incredibly real. Exactly. It is. It's day to day. Those kinds of struggles. It is. It's one day at a time. And I'm not sure if Rafi's gotten there yet, but maybe 7 and 9 will help her out. The one thing I did forget to mention, though, Orions, which obviously we all saw as the sexy, the sex kittens. They're valued. The slave, the Orion slave women, are valued for their appetites, as Dr. Song was explaining to Archer. Just watched that episode the other day. They're valued for their appetites, and that's pretty much. For almost 50 years, that's what you hear. Then you get to Soji, but who was an android. That's the whole. Yeah, that's why. Yeah, I didn't want to bring the android. I don't know. I was talking. Not that I don't like the storyline, and it was very interesting, but just a choice, Travis. But then you find out in the 4th season of Enterprise, Bound, that the women of Orion actually run the show. And the men follow their orders. And it's like, I loved that. Where you're just like, nope, they aren't really slaves. They are using their pheromones to do exactly what they tried to take over the Enterprise. If it hadn't been for that bond between T'Pol and Trip, they would have succeeded. It's the only thing that made them immune to the pheromones. But, you use your natural talents, and yeah, they rule, and I love that. I thought that was a really great way to kind of blow up that whole slave girl scenario. But Mirror Universe women, and there's been a lot of talk about Mirror Universe women, and sex, because, from TOS and the midriff costume where Uhura had a bare belly to that flirtation that she did with Sulu on the bridge. The Mirror Universe has always been sexier than the real universe. And again, we're talking 60s, so they decided to sex this episode up a little bit, maybe show a side of Uhura that they thought the male viewers would be interested in seeing. But again, it comes down to choices. And every woman that's portrayed in the Mirror Universe as sexy or I don't want to use the word promiscuous because I don't like the connotations of that word, but a sexually aggressive woman. It really was. I also like the music from the beginning. I actually cut that down and used that as one of my notifications on my phone. That music that they were dancing to in the beginning. But women's sexuality, the women sexually were very aggressive in the Mirror Universe, and they used it to their advantage. And the one thing I have said my entire life is, if that is your choice, go for it. I mean, look what Hoshi did in the Mirror Universe. She found the men that could benefit her. She charmed them. She killed Archer, and then turned around and declared herself emperor of the Mirror Universe. So yeah, the Mirror Universe is sexy, and the women are sexually aggressive. But again, as long as it comes down to it's their choice to do with and how they see fit, and this is what they wish to do with their bodies and their lives, I've got no problem with it. So I've never had a problem with the way the Mirror Universe was written. I'm rewatching Deep Space Nine, and I haven't gotten to the Mirror Universe episodes yet. I know that's really where you really get a good look at the Mirror Universe in Deep Space Nine. And you know what? I'm going to watch it, and if it changes my opinion, it changes my opinion. But Uhura did what she needed to do in the Mirror Universe, and Hoshi did what she wanted to do, and it got her an emperorship. So, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with it. So I think Star Trek has evolved as far as the strong writing of their female characters. I think they needed to. They could only do what was best for the time. Like I said, they did, I feel like Gene knew where to draw the line. As far as where, like, he knew how to get right up to it as far as what he could write, what he couldn't. So he did all of this on the bridge, but then it's like, yeah, but it is the 60s, so the men are supposed to be Lotharios and the women are supposed to be scantily clad. So he did do that, but he still gave us Uhura and Nurse Chapel and some other strong female characters. Is how certain things are different from sexuality to physical violence, although the Vulcans are still logical. Yeah, you would think that maybe the Vulcans would be their opposite. I mean, it is the Mirror Universe. You would think maybe the Vulcans would be that more passionate form of themselves that they fought so hard for in the Prime Universe. That's a very interesting point, War Dog. And, I've seen bits and pieces of them. I love the Intendant. Nana has said on many occasions that wearing that rubber suit was just ridiculous because you could actually hear her when she walked, and she was incredibly uncomfortable in it. I mean, it looked really great on camera, but as the actor stuck in it, it was a nightmare. So props to Nana for dealing with that to bring us those episodes. I can't wait to get to those episodes. It's going to be a lot of fun. Another female thing I always thought was interesting, and something, because we were talking just about, that just popped into my head. Trials and Tribulations. When Jadzia and Cisco were on the Enterprise, and Jadzia was getting all hot and bothered, and Cisco just assumed that was all over Kirk, and she's like, nope, it was the brainy guy, it was Spock. she had the hots for Mr. Spock. I always thought that was kind of a cool little twist on that whole Kirk is the ladies' man thing, having Jadzia like Spock better. But yeah, like I said, I think Star Trek for the most part has done really well with having strong female characters. I think they've dropped the ball. Over 55 years worth of Trek, how can you not make a mistake or take a stumble every now and then? But for the most part, and like I said, I don't have a problem with them doing the whole sexy Enterprise thing. Again, it was television in the early 2000s, and that was the thing. But again, at least they did it. They did it equally. I mean, there's a point in Harbinger, the episode Harbinger, where T'Pol is fixing. Trip tries to do Vulcan neuropressure on the female Mako, whose name escapes me at the moment. And so T'Pol has to fix it. And so she's giving the neuropressure to this female who obviously is attracted to Trip. And at one point she says, "Oh, and he's got great arms." I mean, so it was, it was equal. Trip and Reed go on a race at a hookup. But then Trip's being Trip's being ogled for his great arms. So I do think that they tried to be equal as far as that, give it a little something to the male and female fans, or I shouldn't even say male and female, to whatever gender floats your boat. I know men that men can crush on Dominic if they want. Nothing wrong with that. And I know plenty of women that actually one of my friends that I met at STLV a couple years ago, she loves 7 and 9. Huge fan of 7 and 9. And why not? She's gorgeous. So that about wraps up the women of Star Trek. It is March 15th. We are moving towards spring. We are moving towards hopefully inoculations, because I would love to be able to see all of your faces in Vegas. Those of you that can make it, those of you that can't make it, I remind you, you need to be following me on all of the socials, because questions, anything that you want for anybody that is going to be in the vendor's room. I did it last year, or not last year, God. I did it in 2019. I will do it again. I will interview and ask questions of anybody that is in the vendor's room, assuming that they are down with that. Again, it is all on their time and their discretion. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel, pretty please, or subscribe to me at Patreon. If you want to head over to Patreon and subscribe. Again, conventions cost money. Getting there costs money. So it would be a huge help to subscribe. If you want to do a one-off, if that's fine too, I can respect that. Then you can go to Teespring. And I did put the link to the Teespring store out on social media, and I will do it again. But these are the two ways that you can support the NX702 podcast. You can become a patron, and that will get you access, unless you're not on Facebook, to my private Facebook group, where you can make suggestions for upcoming shows, make suggestions for who you'd like to see me have as a guest. Let's see. Hold on, Ward. I want to put your question up. I will have to get some questions up for you. Join us. Yes, join War Dog. I have two patrons. I have Domestic and I have War Dog. So join them on Patreon. And yes, definitely get me questions, preferably Enterprise related. But if they're not Enterprise, I will actually go talk to other people from other shows, I promise. But all you got to do is head out to the convention page. Just go to creations, click on conventions. You can find the 55-year mission for Las Vegas. Look down, find out who's going to be in the vendor room. Think of a question. You've got plenty of time. It's not till August. And shoot me a question. Subscribe, buy things, help a girl out, get me out to Vegas. Hope to see you all there. And of course, I hope to see you all next week as well. Thank you once again for hanging out with me. And until I see your face, or I see your chats next week, I guess, live long and prosper.
This is Nicole DeBoer, and you've been listening to the NX7062 podcast.